Good to go. Tēnā koutou katoa, we'll declare today's council meeting open and we'll begin with a karakia. Tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki waho, tue ki roto, tue ki te here tangata, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te au, haumie, huie, hae. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Richard Saunders for his first official council meeting as CE. I've had one or two welcomes already, Richard, but officially at council, it's great to have you with us. So yeah, thank you. We'll move to apologies. I'll just note we have got Michael Laws online and we can see you there, Michael. Good morning. We have an apology for Councillor Scott and an apology for lateness for Gary Callagher. Would somebody care to move those? Yep, Councillor McCall, seconded Councillor Noon, all in favour.
Aye.
Against, carried, thank you. We do have a public forum today. Pierre Marasti will join us. Yeah, you know the drill. Welcome.
Get some props today.
Oh, fantastic. Yep. In your hands.
Kia ora koutou katoa. This month, we are going to assess the damages that have already been done to our planet. We are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. Since 1970, we have lost 69% of our wildlife, including mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, and amphibians. So these props will help you visualize that's how much wildlife we had in 1970. That's what's left today. In the same time, human population more than doubled. Today, by mass, humans and their livestock represent 96% of the total mass of mammals, while all wild mammals together represent only 4% of the total mass of mammals on the planet. This is what 4% looks like. Humans and their livestock, all of the mammals on the planet. This is what extinction looks like. There is more. Insects that are at the base of all terrestrial ecosystems and who are pollinating our crops amongst many other services they render to us. Insects are in an unprecedented decline. 41% of insect species have declined in the last 10 years and are at risk of extinction. It is particularly dramatic in some specific areas. For example, in Germany's protected natural areas, the biomass of flying insects has declined by more than 75% in 27 years. 27 years ago, what's left today? In the Puerto Rican rainforest, in 35 years, 98% of ground insects, virtually all of them, have vanished. In this case, climate change is to blame. These insects have been unable to adapt to the rising temperatures, and their disappearance is causing the collapse of all ecosystems depending on them. Beyond climate change, this collapse in insects and in wildlife populations is caused by human activities, by pollution, by loss of habitat, and of course by the use of insecticides. Some of you might wonder why you should care about the collapse of nature, but we hope that most of you understand that us being the most destructive apes on the planet doesn't make us less dependent on a living ecosystem to survive. A recently released report by the Earth Commission group of scientists shows that we have already damaged most of our planetary systems. I'll send you a link to the study if you want to understand better what this means. But the unequivocal conclusion is that we are in trouble and that we better do something about it before it is too late. When it comes to our local biodiversity, the Manuel-Equia River crisis has been brewing unresolved for years. Its ecosystem is dying, and if we keep managing it so poorly, with the added pressure of climate change, soon it will be lost for everyone. This is a typical example of the tragedy of the commons. It is human nature that individual stakeholders will only care about their own interest and will not pay attention to the consequences of their actions. It is the role of this council to step in and to make the hard decisions for the common good. We can only survive on this planet if we learn to not take more than it can give. In the case of the Manurekia, it is well past time that we allow it to stay above its minimal flow. In order to allow that, all this council has to do is to follow the law. The science has been done, and Te Mana o Te Wai is clear. The health of the river is the first factor to consider around water use consents. To save the Manurekia will be a template for resolving many of our environmental problems. Failing to do so will be another sign that we are not evolved enough to avoid complete collapse. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Pierre, and I do appreciate your presentations every time. I'm possibly slightly frustrated that we haven't really responded to any yet. But I just wanted to assure you, really, it's not a necessary question. We are having discussions about our strategic plan and where climate change and everything is in that. What would success look like for you, not necessarily on the latter item, but on those general principles that you talk about for us to take an action?
On the general principles, there is only one thing the laws of physics care about, and it is the amount of carbon greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. The only success long-term is to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. That's the only thing that will change the trajectory we're in, that is dictated by the laws of physics. That we only react to that, to nothing else. Talking about climate change. When we look at the environment in general, it gets more complex, but climate change, that's really the base of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. We do have a paper today on climate change as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right, so we need to confirm the agenda next, and we do need to move to include 2 extra papers. So the first one is an additional paper, which is extension to Unit 5 contract, which would be in public. The second one would be a paper on appointment of port director in public excluded. So move both of those, yep, and so Andrew and Kate seconded, all in favour, right, against, carried, thank you. Yeah, just the usual reminder on declaration of interests there. Confirmation of minutes, and it is minutes because we've got 2 lots there. So we've got 26th of April and the 24th of May. So perhaps we'll take those. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Noon. Anyone got anything they spotted there? No? All in favour then? Right, against, carried. We've got the usual open actions from resolutions table. And the one that I spotted that was particularly important was that the chairperson would write to the Minister for the Environment to seek an extension to issue decisions on the non-freshwater parts. Yeah, and some other words there, but you get what I'm talking about. And that has been done. So we've completed that. If there's any other actions anyone wants to go over, they can at this point. Otherwise, that's just there for noting.
You may want to say that you are a Prime Minister.
Oh, of course, we'd love to say that. We are. Where is the exact wording of that? Yeah, so we were putting in a nomination for the Super Engaged Awards at the a Super Engaged Award category at the Super Local Awards at Local Government Conference. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic that we've been announced as a finalist in that category. Tasman is a unitary authority and they have been told that they're a finalist in one as well, but we're the only regional council otherwise across the nation to be nominated for any award in any category. So it's a very, it's a difficult thing to be become a finalist because there are literally hundreds of nominations for these things. There's a lot of good work happening around the nation, and recognising our work in intensive winter grazing. Yeah, sorry, it's a long agenda today. Intensive winter grazing category, and to be engaged, you've got to have two parties. You've got to have us as the council and you've got to have the community engaging with us. And another important factor in this is iwi as well, and recognising that we're genuinely doing that in partnership as part of the assessment criteria, and we did that as well. As we know, there was over 50 bespoke events that our staff initiated with the community to ensure that we have got to a place where community are with us on intensive winter grazing and the need to do consents in that space. And we're leading the country in terms of actual consents as well. So some fantastic results there in terms of engagement. But the important thing is that we'll have actual impacts in terms of environmental outcomes as a result of that as well. So it's genuine results will occur. So thank you so much to the staff who have put in a huge amount of work there. And I hope that just even being a finalist is a huge, huge pat on the back. So well done, everyone, particularly Joe and your team. Yeah, you're doing a fantastic job in that space and we're really proud of you. So thanks, Councillor Wilson, for reminding me of that one. Okay, so those are the actions. They're there for you for your information. Let's get on to the matters for consideration. And the first paper is freshwater farm plans. Yep, Joe and Libby.
And Tom.
Oh, and Tom. So this is an update on freshwater farm plans and seeking endorsement for a phased rollout approach. Would like to lead us off.
I will just briefly, and then we will just go straight into questions. So just by way of background, freshwater farm plans were introduced in 2020 as part of the freshwater package that the government introduced, but they are just starting to roll those out across the country now. So there's a national scale implementation, and the regional sector is working collaboratively with MFE on that rollout. We are in the very, very early stages of our implementation for Otago, and MFE have asked us to provide a recommended order for what implementation would look like in Otago in terms of our phasing. They've requested that as part of drafting an order in council to get our order into the legislation. Sorry, there's just that hand up online. So the scope of the paper is really narrow, so it's just focused to the proposed rollout order for Otago. And that's the first lot of information that we need to give to MFE. And we'll be bringing another paper back in August that talks about what implementation will look like in Otago once we know the order that it's going to look like.
Yep.
So happy to take questions.
Sure. Looks like we have got a question there already from Councillor Laws and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I've got a couple. Can I take you to the number 6, please, paragraph 6? And I just want to get the terminology right from now on. The last sentence says the regulations supporting these plans were gazetted, blah, 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 with a phased rollout occurring across Aotearoa. Why are we using Aotearoa and not the word New Zealand?
So that is one of the two names that I understand as two official languages in New Zealand, understanding that we should have put Aotearoa New Zealand there beside that.
Or New Zealand Aotearoa? But I'm going to get to New Zealand being removed in any council paper that comes before us when we actually live in that country.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yep. And oh, sorry, you had another one, didn't you? Thank
I
you.
have.
Yep.
I'm interested in what happens next because it's not quite as simple as I think it has been expressed. If I take you to paragraph 19, which is the way sort of forward, and then to the next steps, which are paragraphs 35 to 38. Well, you've just talked, Madam Chair, about the need to have the community engaged with us. But when it comes to the internal working group of the ORC, what's conspicuously missing is a farmer or land user voice or voices. I'm not aware of any these are the people who actually are going to be implementing on the ground these. And at the moment, this is, it seems, a combination of staff and iwi, which is not, I would have thought, the way in which to approach this. If you really want to get it right, you're going to have a farmer voice sitting there saying that'll work, that won't. The IRC is littered with examples of stuff that's come out of Dunedin that doesn't work once it gets to the ground. So why isn't there a farmer representative or some farmer voice that will assist the internal working group to come up with realistic plans as we go forward?
Yeah, so there is a proposal to engage with farmers and catchment groups and industry groups, and that will happen through our implementation planning for this. So it will very much mirror the approach that we've taken to intensive winter grazing, just on a larger scale. So the internal working group is to make sure that we have all of our processes and things in place, but we will absolutely be doing that engagement to make sure we are providing that right support. And say if we go with North Otago first, working with the catchment group and farmers up there to make sure that we are doing implementation in a way that actually works for the community up there, and taking those really good lessons learned from the winter grazing program and implementing them through this plan.
So would that August paper then perhaps spell that out a little bit?
Yeah, it will. Yeah. So the aim of this paper is we need to provide a recommendation to MFE about our audit, and then that August paper will flesh out what our implementation plan will look like, speaking to the points that Councillor Laws has raised as well.
Yeah, good points. Thank you. Have you got any more, Councillor Laws?
No, those were the two issues I wish to raise, please.
Thank you, Kate.
Mine is in relation to the land and water plan, sort of at G of paragraph 25 first. And just checking the process, we rely heavily, as I think we just discussed, on community people and landowners to engage in developing these farm of the CCCB, really, for the farm plans. And the problem is we haven't yet set on our land and water plan, which will inform those. Was there any pushback on by staff to consider that we should be, there's a lot of good comes out of this, and it's not my view, but I am very aware that we're going to be pushing our communities who are involved in the land and water plan, who want to be engaged positively in that and in the RPS, and are doing the third tranche of work under that, not having the set framework in place, which is the RPS bedded down, because we don't know where that is yet. So the question is, was there any pushback to say, can we do this after the RPS so we have some more certainty as we develop it? Or was that not?
No, there wasn't. But we have been talking in with the policy and planning team to make sure that our rollout order and the work on freshwater farm plans is in sync and doesn't provide that stress across those pathways of work that we've got going across the organisation. Yeah.
And so the question is, there may be some, once the RPS does bed down and the land and water plan, what comes out as the first tranche of CCCBs may need to change.
Yes, and there is the opportunity to change that catchment context as we go. So the catchment context is based on your best available information that you have at the time for that area. And as we go along, we are able to then update that. But the proposed rollout order has taken all of that into consideration in terms of how we're going to be doing it.
Well, have we talked to those communities to check that in their minds and their capability to do this?
As I mentioned before, this is just based off staff advice. We did talk in with the catchment coordinator
with Otago catchment communities around the ability for catchment groups to support this and where they're at with that. But and we've spoken with industry, but we haven't spoken with the communities directly yet.
Yeah. And I appreciate the timing, and it's not your problem, but I just want to acknowledge that this is, it would have been nicer if we could have accepted this as the potential rollout and then talk to our communities and ensure that that's something, but the timing is obviously
not an option available to us under the program MFE. So certainly appreciate that, but that's where we're at.
Well, considering there's a whole lot of other consultation at the moment, the only other one I had is I'm really interested about how it talks about being geospatial presented, and in order to do that well, I presume is interactively geospatially that we can give information. And I'd say if there was one small bit that we could be testing stuff on, and I'm sorry you're going to be sick of the record or the scratch record, providing this is an opportunity to test some citizen science and getting information in geospatially into a framework, I would have thought would be the easiest way for you to get the information you're going to require to develop these. And have you thought about that as a potential pilot project?
So we, as a science team and more broadly, we've been thinking around what resource plans will provide for data harvesting and other bits and pieces to be able to get a better on-ground picture of what's actually occurring in land use and what's actually occurring in terms of how land use mitigations are rolled out. And that could be one of our really important new data inputs for future land and water plan development. But yeah, we're actually really excited about what's next. And you're exactly right. It's critical that all of the data inputs are collected in a way that make them easy to digest and take on board, and then represent to communities at a kind of regional picture. So we are thinking about that, but that is still early days. And there are a number of national tranches of work at the moment picking up on how to do that. And there will be national platforms for doing that. And then for us, it's about how do we make those work for Otago.
And if I just add to that, there's more information to come in August. This is a narrow paper, and appreciate there's a whole lot more in this farm plan space. But what we will be able to explain in August is council's role in this. So we are the regulator of the system, but we don't actually undertake the key roles within the system. We have an oversight role. So we don't certify plans. We don't collect the plans we will draw data out of a national system. So there is a whole lot of work going on that supports this at a national level rather than 16 councils approaching it their own way. And we can explain some more of that in the August paper.
But we do develop the CCCB.
We do develop CCCB, absolutely.
Yeah. And the opportunity to provide that through GIS and spatially and have it accessible is something that the sector is looking at. So Environment South are working on that, and so are Waikato, and we're really keen to have that available to our communities to use as well. It's just a really great step in terms of that accessibility of that information that we are providing to people.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a list of questions. Oh yeah, I thought there were some hands over here as well. I think Ellen, you were actually first, and then there was Elliot. Then we got Kevin, Tim, Michael, Gary, and Alexa. So basically a round table. So yeah, Ellen.
Thank you. Look, just clarification on one point. I'm looking at paragraph 25A, where it says the phasing provides alignment. And this bit,
Which
for
page?
those farmers who cannot meet the relevant standards for intensive winter grazing and would prefer to manage their activity through a freshwater farm plan. Please clarify that, because it's almost implying as though there's a different standard.
So yeah, what it would be is when their consent comes up for replacement, say in 5 years' time, there's a pathway in the regulations where they can undertake intensive winter grazing through their freshwater farm plan if it is certified that it meets the certain criteria. So they still, it is the same standard, it's just a different pathway to meet that standard, and that pathway wasn't currently available for people at the moment. So absolutely same standard, it's just a different pathway to meet the same outcome.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Elliot.
Want to be quick, I was just wondering if someone's got a farm that crosses review or FFU boundaries, how's it decided which one they get put into?
There's some national guidance coming on how we manage that. So we hopefully will be able to explain that in our August paper, but that's something we've flagged internally within our region and across.
Yeah, across the Southland and into Canterbury as well. Yeah.
Right. Kevin.
So just on communicating this to and setting this list, so at this stage we've talked to none of the key players. Once you've struck that list, you've talked to none of the key players in those areas to say you're coming up first or you're coming up second, to see if that would be okay.
No, we haven't. Not the catchment groups, if that's what you're meaning. We've spoken with Otago catchment communities, and they've provided us advice around which catchment groups would be most ready to support it.
Yeah, that they've got the capacity, but not their workloads. Yeah, okay. The key. So one phone call I thought would have fixed that. And you'll be happy to know that North Otago are waiting with open arms for you to arrive, because I've done that call, and they're actually really excited to be first up in the process, but also with the slight trepidation that all the CCCVs and everything else that we're permeating at the moment, our land and water plan, that we do it in such a way that it is coherent and that we're not going back and forward to these people. So, and they're very keen to structure something that we can template across the other roadies. So that was on a couple of calls yesterday. So, and I understand why you haven't got them, but that's
thank you. We'll absolutely take that on board for when we're setting up that next stage. Yeah,
ring me and I'll have the balloons ready when you come. Just on setting, my only concern is another real concern is in paragraph 22 on page 27, where one of the key things, and I thought would have been really important, was water quality risks and assessing which ones you go on. And if we go to tomorrow's papers, when we determine what the water quality of our areas, well, the Dunedin catchments have our poorest performing rivers, yet they're last and not until December 2025. So I just wonder why we've left the most degraded rivers to the end of the system, and with the smallest number of, second smallest number of farming groups, and the smallest area. So that would be my only concern. The ones with the most degraded rivers are not being captured real early on in the piece.
Yeah, so I can talk to that more above the water quality stuff, and then I'll hand to Tom. So the key reason for the proposed rollout is around the number of dairy farmers that are located within each of the different FMU or ROHE, because we are aware that they kind of know what a farm plan is, and so they're an easy, maybe easy is not the right word, they're a good group for us to start with, and getting them engaged and getting on board to support the other farmers within their ROHEs as well. So that's the key reason for that rollout. Tom, do you want to talk about the water quality?
I guess broadly from a water quality perspective, a number of within the Dunedin and Coast FMU, a significant chunk of landowners are on blocks that are smaller than, I think it's 20 hectares, which means that they're exempt from farm plans unless they're undertaking certain activities, which many are not. So lots of lifestyle blocks and other bits and pieces. And also, when you talk about degraded water quality in the Dunedin and Coast FMU, a lot of our representative sites are representative of urban activities. So when you see that list of Ds and whatnot, they're typically in an urban area. A lot of our Dunedin and Coast smaller streams, where we don't hold sites because they're not big enough or representative enough for the wider region, aren't too bad. So it's it's a bit of a tricky one, and I can see why you've raised it in the way you have. But yeah, from our perspective, farm planning is less likely to have a significant impact on water quality in the Dunedin Coast FMU relative to other FMUs.
Right, well, so I understand, so that's good, so we'll get them done in that time. So is there any leeway for us as a regional council to be tighter on that 20 hectare, and I think it's 5 hectares for horticulture, but for smaller holdings that are doing activities that may not necessarily be environmentally efficient in those areas?
That's Donita.
Yeah.
Through the chair, so we've had that conversation as part of the development of the land and water plan, and that option is absolutely available to us if we choose to do that. And different regional councils already have different thresholds for when farm plans kick in. So we can be more stringent than the regulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, in paragraph 26 and 27, you've identified the options. Option 1, which is based on that table 1, and you've provided the logic behind that. I'm just wondering about what the alternative phase rollout might be. Is that something you've got up your sleeves, or is it something you're putting some instruction on, or is it not actually an option at all?
So that would be based on feedback we get today, and that we would alter the proposed rollout to whatever the alternative is discussed now. That someone might have that wants to push an FMU up or down, and so that's for discussion. I don't have another alternative option up my sleeve.
There's no real option to.
Not right
There's
now.
one that we could develop ourselves right now. Yeah, so, but yeah, thank you. Right, next person then is Michael. Yeah, Michael, are you ready to speak now, or you?
Yeah, thank you. No, that's good. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just trying to avert a potential road crash ahead on the implementation plan. I want to go back to those next steps, 35, 36, 37, or 38, which are where we go after today if we pass this particular set of recommendations. So I'm going to ask, when it comes to, if you look at paragraphs 28, 29, 31, paragraphs 28, 29, and 31, these freshwater farm plans are going to be developed with Te Ao Māori and Mātauranga Kaitahu embedded in Otago communities as a strategic policy consideration. Mātauranga Kaitahu as an integral part of our decision making, and the implementation of freshwater plans to involve ongoing partnership with mana whenua as well as engagement, etc. For the implementation paper, is it possible for you to define for me as relevant, so not something philosophical or spiritual, but as will affect our policies, as to how Te Ao Māori, Mātauranga Kaitahu will affect the implementation program, please? Because that is the same question that my constituents are going to ask when this policy is embedded upon them, and they will want to know, how is that relevant to the farm plan that I am required by law and the Otago Regional Council to implement?
Yes, happy to include that in the next paper.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Gary.
Great, thank you. Michael's just covered one of my questions. My other one was sort of almost in line with what Kevin was asking. I suppose, yeah, his region is ready for and far more advanced, but across my region, the uncertainty for us is around what will the future be. And I think the differences between all of those that get to have a say in that is still poles apart, where we are no closer. So the farm plans or that I suppose a farmer in my region would then have to look to put in place when they don't know the outcome of the RPS, the outcome of the land and water plan, and the outcome of where they'll get to with either longer term consents or getting past Plan Change 7, which just stymied everybody. So I wonder, is before that next paper comes out, is there the ability to talk to more of the catchment groups and just see their ability to even put in place an effective farm plan with that uncertainty?
We are on a tight timeframe with MFA in terms of getting this back to them to meet their need for the Order in Council. Appreciating that conversations with the community are equally as important, but one thing to recognise is that this is a parallel work stream to our Land and Water Plan and our RPS. So it's not going to do the things that the Land and Water Plan is going to do, and it's not going to do the things that our RPS does. Whilst it will take some information in terms of our catchment context, that is information that we already hold that will be coming through into the RPS and our Land and Water Plan. So yeah, it's hard. It's the parallel but connected projects at different points for different reasons. So yes, we could go and talk to those communities, but I'm not sure if that will materially change the proposed rollout order that we've put forward. Whilst we would be looking at North Otago first, we would absolutely be starting the conversations with other catchments to raise that general awareness around farm plans, what it means, and those key steps that they can be taking in the interim. So it's not as if there will be nothing from us until 2023 or 2024. It would be an ongoing conversation. So yes, we could go back and talk to them, but that would then mean potentially a change to the order. And then we would be having to then get back to you guys and then through to MFE as well.
Sorry, yeah, I'm struggling with that because I wasn't really saying go and talk to the community. I was saying talk to the affected farmers who have been hamstrung for too long already and are still left in limbo and an unknown state of where minimum flows are going to end up with, where allocation for water is going to end up with, and what that then means to their farms. And as I listened to our speaker in public forum this morning, then his view, and I know it's the view of some of those outside of the farming community, are just poles apart. And of course, there's a massive fight still to be had with these regions while they try and get to some sanity and sensibility before we destroy our economy for supposedly saving an environment that's already in reasonable health and has some very good parts to be in good health in the near future. So I don't know. I think in my mind, these farmers are burdened at the moment, and their farm plans, if the wrong decisions are made, could be very different. So I would hope that they would have a better say in the rollout. But
thanks,
I don't know.
Kelleher. I guess we are currently in questions, but we will move into debate, and that would be where we put forward if there was another more sensible approach to the rollout or the approach. That's what we're being asked to consider. So as a representative of your community, you could put forward a view on what you felt was a sensible approach. So you have a think on that one. We've got lots more hands up. Have you got any other questions though, Gary?
Well, no, other than just that was still part of my question, which I didn't think was an overly effective answer. So anyway, look, no,
maybe I'll have a go, Gary. So the pressure we're under is to ensure that we take an opportunity as a council to influence the minister's order in council. Otherwise, it will be dictated to us because they need to get this through so the legislation can be given effect to, so that every area in the country is turned on by the end of 2025. I take your point around uncertainty, and part of the intensive winter grazing process we ran did involve us working closely with those most affected. I'm not sure that has a significant impact on a farm plan because the regulations just require you to plan for the activities that you're currently undertaking, and you are able, as situations change, to update that plan to better reflect the rules and requirements on a farm at a particular point in time. So we would have support in place across ORC to work with people who are unsure, and I'm sure that our partnerships we've built with the industry groups will enable them to go out and support farmers that are a little bit unsure as well, so that they can get through this process and have a certified plan so they comply with those national regulations. So I take your point around the uncertainty with the Land and Water Plan, but these farm plans are created based on catchment context, which is
the rules in place and the information available at a point in time. And then the regulations allow for them to be updated if there's a change in circumstances. So certainly what you've heard is that there will be a constant or there will be an implementation plan that involves really good support for those that want it, and that will include partnerships with catchment groups and industry groups. And then we just need to make sure we are very clear in the guidance we provide as to the rules that apply at the time, and if there are changes, noting we've still got to go through a process to notify and then a full commissioner process to actually determine what the outcome will be, then we need to work with those farmers to update plans so that they reflect that new rule framework.
Okay, no, that's great. Thanks, Richard. That's a helpful answer.
Thank you. Alexa, you had your hand up.
I did, but Tim asked the question. It was around different rollout options. Thanks.
Lloyd, you haven't spoken.
Oh yeah, no, just first of all, the paper's got quite a narrow scope. It's really about setting the order for a rollout of farm environment plans, which every area in the country has to do. And I understand the rationale for the rollout order that you've got, and I don't have any real questions. My question, once we get the implementation and capability, within areas, that will become more clear. My question is, can you roll it out quicker? If you find that we start doing it North Otago and everything's going really well, or can you roll it out quicker than the intended program if we're in a position to be able to manage that? Or is it set by whatever gets written in the legislation is my question.
It's set by whatever the Order in Council provides, so through MFE, and that will be the regulation.
That includes the timing.
Yeah, so includes the timing. The guidance we have is that we should be rolling out at no larger than an FMU scale, and that every 6 months we need to bring a new area on board until December 2025. So there's some councils across New Zealand that don't have, they are just rolling out from 2025. So they'll just have every area going live then. So we're actually in quite a fortunate position, even though it comes with some cons as well, but that we can roll out and stage our rollout. So we're lucky in that regard that we have time to focus on those areas and we can move to the next one, and we can support our farmers to get the mechanisms in place that they need.
I'll just add one thing to that, Lloyd, is that there are councils in Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti in particular who are now delayed due to recent events. And so there's likely to be a secondary order in council process in the future once they've done their planning. So if we felt we were in a position and we had a good conversation with one of those later communities and wanted, then I don't think we're prevented from potentially looking at it in the future, because there will be subsequent order in council processes. But I think the important thing is that we influence the one that's going up now.
So that's basically the question. So somebody in the Paeri, that's engaged and wants to get the freshwater farm plan, basically has to wait until their time comes up.
Yeah, I've clarified that, and they could create their plan and have it ready, but they can't have it certified until that time.
Okay, no, thank you.
Okay, we are getting to about a third round of questions, but we will quickly whip them out and then we'll go on to the debate. So I've got Michael and then Kevin. I think I've got Michael.
Sorry, that was just me not putting my hand down.
No worries. Thanks, Michael. Kevin.
The certification and auditing of these plans, how is that? That has to be done by independent people who probably at the moment we've got no one certified in the country of being one, or something. Probably that process is happening. A, how is that process going to happen? And B, how much money will MFE be providing for that training of those people?
So we will provide more details in that August report. That's the implementation package.
Right.
And absolutely acknowledge these are all very valid questions, and there is a whole lot of information needed that talks about the different parts of this process and the costs. But not within scope of this one, but we can make a note and make sure we include those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We've got a couple of recommendations there. Anyone want to move those as a starting point?
I'm happy to move.
Yep, Councillor Malcolm, seconded councillor Weir. Anybody want to enter into debate? Councillor Wilson.
Presuming no one's voted. Look, I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier, but I want to put on record that I think the process, while it may be a really good idea to have freshwater farm plans and the modules that may be included in existing plans, my concern here is that the timing, given Otago's other planning framework, and that the ratepayers of Otago are under a lot of pressure to do a whole lot of other consultation. It really concerns me that we're having this foisted upon us without a clear framework already in place. Had we had our RPS and bedded down, even with the years, I'd feel a lot more confident with that and creating these CCCVs. We're expecting our community to be doing a lot of catch up at the moment. And I just wanted to, it's frustrating that we don't have that time frame better. We've been the guinea pig on a lot of these things, and we seem to be a guinea pig in this and to a certain extent as well. I hope it works, but I just want to put it out and acknowledge the hard work and our reliance, I think, on a community goodwill here to be able to roll this out effectively. And I think they'll, that we're doing this without even any idea of the costs or really the how it's and who's going to have it, I think is really frustrating. For today's the only day, the first time I've heard that we're not going to be holding these. I'd always thought we were going to be holding these things in our in our databases. So it's just a really fluid position, and I that fills me with some trepidation that we're requiring our community to go down this path without having more solid ideas of what these things are. But having said that, I'm excited by the freshwater farm plans as an opportunity to build with the community, and I hope that they engage fully with us on this role, because we're going to need them with us.
Anyone else? Councillor Malcolm.
Michael, I'll just let Roy reply.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Michael.
The devil will be in the detail on this issue, on the implementation and how we achieve it, on our communication, and particularly on the sensitivity we show to a sector of our society in particular that has feeling under siege and that has had massive change imposed upon it, often without consultation and often without any degree of sensitivity of the day-to-day operations of our agricultural and horticultural communities. The reason I asked the questions earlier on is because every aspect of this is going to need to be communicated, the reasons why and how they are actually going to improve the environment and also improve the understanding of our stakeholders. We always tell ourselves a simple truth, and that is that the farmers, the horticulturalists, the viticulturalists, those that will have these farm plans imposed upon them, are our front line in maintaining and improving the environment in which we live. It is extraordinarily important that we do not alienate them more than they have been alienated already by the massive changes that have been imposed upon them, often without any consideration at all. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Noone.
Thanks, Madam Chair. In my view, this is a step for landowners, farmers who have a genuine attachment with the land, not only from an economic perspective, but from a sustainability perspective. And on a daily basis, they're dealing with what nature throws at them. And having a farm plan is documenting, I suppose, what a lot of landowners and farmers already carry out on that piece of land, simply because that genuine attachment means they either stay in business or not. So the way I see it, the regional council, and I'm pleased to hear today that the implementation phase will have a lens of connection with catchment groups. That's really good to hear. I think also it's really important to remember that the Otago Regional Council has invested heavily in the reg space or non-regulatory space. So we are stepping up to the plate to help landowners and farmers deliver on this sort of government legislation. So, yep, we're heading into a new space, but I think it's a positive space, and we will do this together with landowners. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to say as well that, that hats off to farmers who already, many of them have environmental plans of some sort, and industry groups have been in this space developing environmental farm plans for many years now. So we have a lot of good leadership in this space. And as Councillor Noon's just said as well, to be able to farm or do a productive system in the landscape, you have to be able to understand that you need a healthy environment to sustain that productive system, and also our ecological systems as well. So the purpose here is to build on those existing plans that are there as well, to not be overly onerous and to get the best we can from what we're doing already, and to take that leadership and expand it wider, and we will all be able to sustain those systems that we all rely on. So yeah, well said, Councillor Noon. There's a great opportunity for our country, I think, to take a bit of a leadership role in this space. So yep, well done. Now, Evan, you wanted to write a reply, but I'll just check if there's anyone else who wants to say anything quickly. Thank you.
I'm completely in favour of freshwater farm plans. I think the concept is really, really good, and just reiterating what Councillor Noon said, it's what so much is already in practice is putting down and documenting, and I think that will go a long way. It is a real shame that yet another, and it has been flagged that these are coming in, but it's a real shame that government again is throwing something down that's not completely tested and expecting some other entities to put that into place. It would have been great to grab a group, for instance, grab North Otago government to grab it and say, let's test this and let's put it together and sort out all the cobwebs with a group of good people. But we as a group, ORC, will do that. And I'll just reiterate to staff that we have the North Otago Sustainable Land Management Group. We've got North Otago Irrigation Company, the Lower Waitaki Irrigation Company, and the East Otago catchment groups that are really strong in that area and looking at and aware that this is happening. They have a strong bent to get this going and to make sure that it is right. So I think it will be a very good place to set a template, and perhaps and it will help other areas to get this this compulsory action into place. So yep, let's get there and let's do it. But the communication and bringing everything else we're doing together with it will be an absolutely key part, so we're not putting too much pressure on our communities. So yep, I'm happy to get this paper voted on.
Good one, thank you. We'll put it then. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks everyone. We will move on to 8.2, which is possibly some of the same people staying up here on ICM, Integrated Catchment Management, the Catlins terms of reference. Just wait for Kevin to come forward, and Libby will stay. For a number of people around the table who have been involved as well for some time in the development of this, and we've all watched it evolve. So yeah, great to be at this point. And if you wanted to introduce the paper, you're welcome to. We've read it and we understand the background.
Thank you. So this paper is just a proposal for the terms of reference for the Catlins Integrated Catchment Group. So I think if everyone has read it, we can just get into questions.
Sure, thank you. Are there any questions?
I'll
move
it up.
Wilson.
I'll move it, but I will want to talk to the motion.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions.
Oh yeah, okay. We'll have questions first.
I'm really happy with the program that's set out. But my real issue is again going back to CCCBs that we are about to do, and if they are different, if we're moving at a different pace to this process, how do we realign that? And is there a way we can ensure that it is aligned at the start?
It's a good question. We'll have a paper coming in August at the Environmental Implementation Committee where we can talk more about the rollout, but we have tried to align as much as we can with the CCCV through this proposed through this work, but we and I guess the point, we can change our CCCV as we get more information through integrated catchment management work. We're not limited in what we put forward as CCCV. So that, but we can go into more detail in our paper in August around how that aligns.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, is without getting back into that paper again, is that there's the catchment context, values and challenges is a living document. I think what we're finding through national conversations is that most councils will develop a first generation based on existing rules and any other plans that may be relevant, iwi management plans. Some have got catchment action plans, and then over time, as the new generation of land and water plans or water plans get completed by councils, they will, and more science becomes available, those documents will be updated, and then the next time a farmer comes in to have a freshwater farm plan certified under that regulation, it will be updated to reflect what the latest information is. So we've got that ability over time to make sure that that reflects what our current knowledge of the environment is.
So subsequent to that, Madam Chair, so is the final, I suppose the final space being that the CCCV actually will align with the catchment action plan, or one will align with it, or they should be aligning together?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tim.
Just reading through this, and hopefully I understand it. The Catlins Integrated Catchment Group proposal for its structure and membership, is it relying on volunteers, or are we talking about paid positions here? Because it seems like there's a lot of work here for a group of volunteers to do. And I was just wondering about how do you actually, I mean, there's probably a little bit of over expectation of people to actually step up and do these things in communities. And we're placing a lot of responsibilities on them. What's the backup and remuneration or anything, the incentive for them to get onto these committees?
That's a good question. At the moment, we don't have a policy, I guess, aligned for ORC around how we remunerate our communities and the work that they're doing to contribute to the outcomes for Otago. And so there is work going on in that space, but the policy has not been developed yet. So we want to make sure that if we were to remunerate or incentivize in some way, that we're consistent, we're not setting expectations or precedents that could have a perverse outcome in the long run. So we need to be very careful around what that policy says. So at the moment, we don't have a view on remuneration of these members, but that's something that we can think about and consider as we'll figure out what the barriers and the benefits are for those people to join us and come on this journey with us. There's other ways we can incentivize people other than paying them as well. So we have to figure that out still.
So there's 15 members that are required for this committee. Do you know who they are at the moment?
No. We'll have
any indication that people will step up for this role?
Hopefully.
And you've got four that will.
Yeah.
Yes.
We are, as it says in the paper briefly, we'll have a community meeting down in the Catlins in the next couple of weeks, and in which we can explain the entirety of the process and the expectations and try and enthuse them to want to be a part of this with us. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Elliot. Oh, do you have a question? No, okay, that's fine. No worries. Right, so we had him over in the seconder anyway. Yep, Andrew put his hand up silently.
Sorry.
Do you want to speak now?
Look, I do want to speak to this. This is one of the most exciting things that I think I'm going to be involved in, and at a small level, just kicking this off at a lower level has been great to see the input from the volunteers. And yesterday we had a meeting where 4 people really contributed well, and I'm hoping that they'll be putting their hands up. And if that's the caliber of the people who are, then it's really, really exciting space. I just wanted to talk to, Brian had raised an issue about that I wanted to talk to, and amongst the other things that people have said today. One is that I think that we need to go bravely with a community group and let them be in charge of their own messaging. And I think he was concerned about some of that comms piece. I think that the way that this is going to be created is it's going to be working side by side with the ORC, and we'll be making sure that it's communicating well with the ORC if there's an issue before it goes publicly on it. But I think we need to ensure that we're empowering a community to be in a community first and foremost, not just be a voice for us. The CCCBs are at the moment about fresh water. And the really exciting thing about the CAP is that it's not, with this ICM, we're not limiting the issues to just fresh water. And we're working with communities on the issues they have in their community, which gives a much broader range. And while this will work in with the CCCB, I think it's a much more empowering way of developing the community of where it wants to go. So the freshwater and the farm plans that people have already created will have a module on freshwater, but it may have modules that may do an even better job for the environment, much broader matters that comes out of the CAP work. So really, again, exciting space to be at, because we're answering the needs of the community and what their needs are, what their demands are. Because it will talk about biosecurity, it will talk about biodiversity, it will talk about recreation, it may even talk about Mangakai, which I know is an issue for Mana Whenua and the Catlins, and access to those, which is really exciting opportunities to incorporate into farm plans. Yeah, the volunteers, again, we're relying on volunteers, but we've been, the catchment groups have been up and running. We're not inventing some of these groups. Those volunteers have been there doing the stuff, and what's really exciting for me is that I think we're in a space where we're engaging with communities and resourcing our engagement at a much better level, which means that we'll get much better outcomes. And so for all of those reasons, I'm really excited to be supporting this motion, but it's only the start of a much broader way of we can work more effectively with communities and get really amazing outcomes.
Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to support the motion as well. At the end of the day, this is actually quite new. And there's a wee bit of, it's been a bit of a journey, and everybody's working out where their roles are fitting in. And that journey is going to continue into the future as we go into the Catlins, where everybody figures out their roles within, to get to the end goals. I think this is like a terms of reference that's been set up, but that doesn't mean to say that given time, it'll be refined over time as we work out how it all works. And that may be regarding, numbers of people, all that. I think one of the big challenges we've got is to get when we're setting up the group, is to get a good cross section of people, and we get people in lots of, we've got to have all the seats filled so that we've got the whole area covered, and within all the stakeholders, etc. within that area are well represented as well. And so, no, I think it's I'd see it quite different to the CCCB that the freshwater farm plans are. That's just about freshwater farm plan. It's something that we've probably already got sitting over here in the land and water plan. It's got all the work that's being done in the section 32 and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of that information there. This is about having communities looking holistically at their whole area and working as a whole area, and from all angles to give improvement that everybody can be proud of. So it's a little bit different, so it's a wee bit wider scoping than what the CCCVs would be, as Councillor Wilson was saying. So, I'll support it and look forward to having a very successful first meeting on whichever day that is.
18th of July.
Yeah. 18th of July.
I just want to say as well, well done to everyone that has pulled this together. The Catlins is an absolutely spectacular little gem in Otago, so I'm really pleased that we're doing this focus in this area. Has some very scarce ecotypes. Coastal forest on the east coast is really pretty special. Also, Andrew and I, as we went through the pest plan development and just the amount of leadership that has been in this, people, you know, just working away. A lot of volunteer groups have been working for many years, actually decades in this space, particularly on biodiversity and pest and weed control. So yeah, a real opportunity to do an actual integrated catchment management approach that's broader than water quality. We've also got estuaries there that are some of the best in the country, and some very nice waterways as well. So I think there's a lot of ingredients there for really something special. So that's fantastic, first of all. And great to see some leadership amongst our governors working with community and particularly iwi as well as partners on this. And this was a priority for iwi as well to kick off with. I do think on reflection that since we've started kicking off our integrated catchment approach, looking broader than the Catlins, because I'm really happy with this report and the terms of reference are great. I think we do need to think as part of the long-term planning about how the space has actually changed over the last few years since the beginning of the LTP, and just, you know, initial glance from me 3 years ago, we deliberately took a heavy investment in integrated catchment management because it's great and it makes a lot of sense. Since that time, we have Otago catchment communities really hitting the ground, you know, running. There's a lot happening in that space, which is fantastic. We've had Jobs for Nature as well, and we've got 50 projects across Otago now in that space. So a real push for a surge in community getting behind volunteer and initiatives, making things happen. Central government's entered this space as well. We're seeing staff members from central government organisations entering this type of space. National policy mandating catchment action plans as well for degraded waterways coming forth, and this is much broader than waterways, so we get that, but that's happening in this space. So I think it might be useful for us to just have a think about what we are required to do in this space since, you know, the 3 years ago, and what we want to do. But today I'm really happy to get behind this approach for the Catlins. It's definitely the right approach for this catchment and the right timing, a non-regulatory approach that looks at a whole realm of biodiversity, water, or anything basically within the catchment, and the synergies that can come from that, and developing some tools too, which will be relevant for other catchments. So that's good. I just think it's more of a signal for us as governors that we do need to be doing some leadership, and we'd love your support as well, Libby and team, and just getting our heads around how has this space shifted, and do we need to shift focus at all as well. It's going to be really important for us to consider that for that LTP time. Yep. So we've got, Councillor McCall.
I'll just add a little bit. I should have looked at my notes. I think I just probably wanted to recognise the input that's been put into the project to date. I think there's 7 meetings, either 6 or 7 meetings, and we've had two local representatives that have attended every meeting and had full participation in every meeting. And also, I just wanted to recognise Simon O'Meara, who's been on that committee representing Otago catchment communities, and he's also attended every meeting as well. So it's been, and also it's been it's actually a really awesome chance that we can have on the ground partnership with the local iwi. And Maria and Sandra representing Te Ao Morima and Okaha have also had a full input into get to where we are now. And it's like it's really worked as a one team approach, which is really awesome. And also just make mention of people at the top table as well. Anna has been leading the process, so well done, and the backup from the office staff to get it to where we are. So it's really good to see there's been such commitment put into the process, which gives you some confidence that we can pull it off.
Good one.
Thank you.
Well said. Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder there, so I think we do. I'll put that. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, so next one is policy guidance from the governance group for developing the Land and Water Regional Plan. And as you have seen, there are a number of attachments there. Everyone's had a chance to see these previously. So yeah, I'll just wait for Anita and just Anita, and we've got Fleur online.
Tom.
Oh, yep, Tom's coming back too.
Tom was summoned about 15 minutes ago, but
so just while we're doing that.
Yeah.
So before we just kick off, I think Richard's just got
Yes, I'll
something to say.
Make comment on this paper before we get into and then Anita or Fleur can introduce it. So just around acknowledging that the council is aware of the conflict of interest conversation around the land and water plan. I know a number of people have been engaging to get some advice to make sure that we protect ourselves through this process. Just confirming the advice for this paper, which is a noting paper to guide our policy direction ahead of the next consultation round. We have had it confirmed that there are no issues with any councillor partaking in this process today. But just in that overarching advice and reminder for councillors to continue to manage their interests in what discussions that you choose to participate in terms of specific topics. But I think it is important to acknowledge that we have done some work both with legal advice and the Auditor General to confirm that the paper today there are no risks associated with that because of the stage of the process we're at and because it is a noting paper to inform direction for further conversations with the community. So I'll hand over to Anita for the paper.
Yeah, thanks. So Tom was going to introduce this, but he's not here, and Fleur's unwell, so I'm going to try and let her say nothing today, but I noticed she's stoically sitting on the screen. So thanks. So we were just going to take the paper as read. For most councillors, you've seen this 3 times now, so it will be familiar, but happy to take any questions that you've got.
Yep, I was just thinking in terms of getting through this and the fact that we have seen it before, whether we take each section, I suppose, and whether there's a question or two on them. We don't want to take all day over this as a hint, but they're very important topics, so I don't want to rush you either.
My question is across them sort of because
okay, sure.
Look, I don't want to ask any questions I've asked before.
Yeah.
And it comes out of a conversation. We're part of a GHG group looking at how and what are the practical solutions to production of GHG on farms. And one of those discussions was about arable crops, looking at that, but that still requires water. And in that context, we had a discussion about the Tare and MIC. And I don't think I'm dealing with conflict here, but we often talk about over allocation of water, which is one that is moot in that I don't want to go into the over allocation part, but what we don't talk about, and it's sort of highlighted in one of these reports, but doesn't go right across all of the reports, is the ability to use stored water that's on river to neutralize the flows, or at least give, and at the moment the conditions of consent are often that you have to add X amount of cubics of water or litres of water per second, or not let it go under that flow. The question I have is, are we looking at rules or ways, or is it outside of these papers and the Land and Water Plan, but actually actions by groups like MIC that can use their capacity to do different flows that are better for to naturalize or to reflect those sort of things. You've got a great picture of it in the one of these slides.
So avoiding flatlining.
Yeah, but
yeah.
One of the so page.
We would consider that.
Yeah, page 55. Is it a rule thing, or is it something that you'll be doing by just working with those communities? I'm not quite sure. Sometimes the rules in land and water plan are the baseline rather than the best practice.
Have we voiced the principles
Yeah.
through this of reflecting natural variation and flow?
Yeah, I think that the way that we are interpreting Te Whānau means we have to have that natural variability, and so we need to use the tools that we have. So that's why things like residual flows sometimes, as opposed to minimum flows, enable you to mimic natural patterns better. So there will be a rule framework around it.
I suppose we spend so much time on what I've been thinking in my head is that we spend a lot of time worrying about the rules which are the baselines that don't go past, rather than what best practice is. And while some of these groups have consents that go out a long time, whether those conversations are happening before those consents come up for renewal. MIC is a great example. In that last year, I think they contributed a lot of water to the flowing of the Tairi, but I presume there were other areas, and maybe Contact could do that too.
I could speak to a small amount of experience in that space. I think you would end up with specific consent conditions or specific consent conversations with parties who were able to provide that kind of influence. And MIC would be one, other big irrigation companies would be others. Or you might use residual flows as Anita was suggesting through the plan to achieve the same outcome, but there's probably lots of ways to do it. In the interim, before those consents come up and all of that sort of stuff, I know I had a positive conversation with a number of members of MIC, a number of staff of MIC last year around the same principles, and they were starting to think about what that looked like from their perspective. And I think it's just a matter of continuing those conversations and continuing to put the rule framework and other things in behind. But that the principles around maintaining ecological flows in a manner that mimics natural flow regimes, that was something that, and within that conversation, that MIC were pretty confident that there might be something they could do to support that.
Thank you. Right, so I said we might go through each topic. If I'll just give a space now, though, for anyone that wants to bring up something that's an absolute showstopper, because we've got sort of two options of one is that we basically agree with the direction there, and the other one would be for council to ask staff to revisit things. So is there anyone that wants to raise right now that that's the sort of thing we're going to bring up? No?
Another one that shows.
Okay, cool. Lloyd, what do you do?
Oh no, I'm happy to move them.
Okay. I was like, what? Yeah. We've got to move around a second to the end. Yep. Got that, Kylie. We got Councillor McCall and Councillor Weir.
Chair, I should have just said we've also got Danny Korovar online for any forestry. Might be a couple of topics. So if you've got any questions for Danny, she's online as well.
Thank you. All right, well, shall we start then with, I don't know whether we're going to have questions on topics by topics, because we don't want to draw this out forever either, but this one is important. So we'll start with setting of take limits and environmental flows for rivers. Is there anyone with a question or
Can I just provide one of the pieces of feedback we got at both governance group and the workshop was, what does it look like? So I've just got a couple of slides, which is why I joined the meeting noisily before, so I could show you those. So I'll just share.
Tom, if you want to go forward, you're welcome to, but
You may not want to.
don't have to. We're just at the debating. Well, we're going to have some questions if we've got any still. We've got a mover and a seconder.
I got one a bit later on.
Yep.
It's not really minor.
Sorry, Anita.
No, that's okay. So that's just an example of what your narrative take and this is a hypothetical river, doesn't exist. But if you had a river, this is your narrative flow and your numerical flow. So just to show you what it looks like, and I can circulate this slide around.
Can you just click?
Can Gary see this?
He should be able to, it's being shared.
Okay.
Claire can see it, I
Yeah.
think, yeah. So he should-
Neither can you make it bigger, so it's fine. Just can't quite read it. We'll get there. Good luck between us.
And these are not like together, these are two separate
Two
examples, right? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So you'll recall there's been conversations about a narrative take limit and a numerical take limit and what they look like. And so we're just providing for you what they look like. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
I can see your hands up, Gary, so that's good. Everyone's taken that in, had enough time for that. We'll just, we've got mover and seconder, like I said, but I did say that we'll have questions, so we will do that. Gary, do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I suppose my question is that the example, which is, thanks Anita, that's helpful, but now that we have a set of proposed parameters, we should be able to apply them quite easily, I would have thought, to what is currently done, and then what are the true implications of that across, I guess, what are supposedly the easier catchments. So do we have an understanding of that? Is there anything quantified around what will be the implications? When this is put to the communities there, is it going to be shock and horror still, or is it going to be, oh, okay, no, we can live with that? That is basically what we're doing now.
So through the chair, so once we get the policy direction today, that'll be the next step, is then starting to apply them river by river, stretch by stretch, region by region, so that when we have those conversations with the community, we can socialise it with their river that they might take from. But also part of that will enable us to see how far away we are from what they're currently taking, so where those numbers sit. So we need to get this direction to enable us to do the next step to enable us to have that conversation. So are they over or under? Are they within? How close is it to what they're already doing?
So you're asking council to approve something with no real understanding of what it could do and what benefit or change it might create.
So we're asking you to approve the principles that we've discussed at length, that the ones that we believe are required under the NPS to satisfy Te Mana o Te Wai. And then the conversation becomes, and then what does it mean, river by river, FMU by FMU?
Yep.
But sorry, there's numbers proposed there that have been based on some level of assessment, I assume, for each catchment. And then from that, they would be, that there is obviously justification for those numbers that are not just broad, they are quite specific.
Yeah, that's a good question. So why do we think those numbers are the ones we want to see the one? Yep.
To you, Madam Chair, if I may respond to that. These narrative limits and numeric limits, they're default limits that will only be applied to catchments where there is low hydrological modification through water taking. So what that actually means is that we're only going to use those limits where we not have to claw back on allocation, if that makes sense. It still means that they will have a minimum flow set on them, and that will have an impact. And there will be an assessment done, an economic impact assessment that will be incorporated in the section 32. But they're basically applied to catchments where, compared to some of the more complex ones like the Taieri or the Manaharakia, where you don't have a high degree of allocation currently.
Okay. Councillor Laws.
Yeah, I wanted to flag the same issue as Gary, really. If you've got the mode that you want to drive, then I'd now like to see, I know what you call it, the principles, then I'd like to see, and governance to approve, the practical application of those to the catchments or to the rivers or to this year before it goes out for public discussion. I am wary of principles being used to drive policy without seeing it in the detail that will be discussed with our communities. And I think that should come, Madam Chair, to governance for send-off before that discussion occurs.
So through the chair, if you note the paper today, then we will undertake the exercise of applying them, and you'll see those before we do the consultation.
For approval,
sorry,
and discussion.
It will depend on the timing of the meetings, to be honest, council meetings, but it wasn't necessarily an approval process. But I can have a chat with Richard about how we manage that.
Well, just laying out here that, I mean, there's no way in the world that I'm going to be happy as an elected member knowing that something is not going to be approved by us, no matter how non-nuclear, as Tom de Pelsemaker says, the catchment is. That's for us to approve that, not for staff to go off, as has been the damage of the past, and discuss those limits without governance having a clear knowledge of what is to be discussed and to approve that. That's our role.
Thanks. Did you want to comment?
No, so I mean, the question is, will council see the application of these principles before it goes out? So that if the paper's noted today, staff will go through that process, which will enable us to populate it effectively. What is the round 3 consultation plan? And there will be an opportunity for councillors to see that and to comment on it, because if we bring something to you, we would expect some comment back. It's not an approval at that point. There's no approval through this. We just need to make sure that we are keeping councillors well informed of the steps within the process and the ability to provide feedback for those different steps.
Okay,
I'm taking that's a yes, is it? So I'm just getting that's a yes, Richard. Sorry, just clarifying that.
It's a yes, but clarification around your use of approval. Is that it's not an approval process at that point. We're not seeking a formal decision through this process, but absolutely yes, you will see it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. We've got Kevin, Tim, then Andrew.
Yeah, look, I'm probably struggling with this at the fact that we've got a formula that we haven't got applicable examples to show us what that is actually done. So somewhere that must have been tested to say, well, so that's the part, and I think that's on reflecting what Council Laws is saying, that we've got this formula. Let's see the results of that formula, what it actually is, what it actually do, and probably the examples of where you would apply it to. That's
through the chair. I might just get Tom to talk about the science that you've seen a few times that underpinned that you approved for us to get to this
no problem at all. Yeah,
So,
and I agree that I've seen it all the way through, but now we're at the stage now where we're saying, well, what does that do to the creek up the end of that hill?
Yep.
And that's the part that I have what we approved in good faith and backing our staff doing that process. Have we actually landed in the right space?
So I'll just briefly talk to some of the pre-work that went into setting out which catchments would be appropriate for these types of rules without significant impact to existing water use. So we commissioned a regional hydrological model. We commissioned a couple actually to try and make sure we've got it as accurate as possible. And we have naturalised MALF estimates for 317 catchments in Otago. These are catchments that either drain to the Clutha, the Upper Lakes, or the sea, or the Waitaki. So we have those estimates. We've then considered the level of allocation within that same catchment area, and broadly, and when I say level of allocation, I mean paper allocation. So the highest potential take in a given catchment. And if you think about what that might include, that would include in a Upper Lakes catchment context, that might include take for snowmaking, which would occur in your shoulder seasons and not in your low flow seasons. Take for irrigation, take for municipal supplies, that sort of thing. These are all, but so what I'm trying to draw context on is that that paper allocation number is likely to be significantly inflated over and above what is actually taken in those catchments at any point in time. So we've then applied those using these principles or something very, very similar to these principles, bearing in mind that we did this long before the principles were developed to this level. And then and determined that there were, the numbers I don't have really confidently in my head at the moment, but around 19 catchments that weren't appropriate for these particular rules. And as Tom mentioned before, the examples would be the Manahira, Tairi, the Kakanui, another example. So we've taken those out of that kind of broad regional process and started developing bespoke assessments that are far more detailed for each of those 19 catchments. And for the other catchments, we determined that there would be very, very unlikely that any rules like this would have any impact on water users at this stage. We pass those on to policy to then work up these types of frameworks.
Yeah. Thank you. Got that one. Right, sorry, did I have someone? Oh, yeah, it was Tim, thank you.
Yeah, I don't see too much complexity in the default limit settings for these easy catchments. I think the reference you've got is Hayes et al. As a guideline. And I presume that those are the guidelines for establishing a healthy river. So no issues there. I have confidence in that science, and I don't see any point in reinventing the work that's gone before or any of the rework. I think we can take it as a job done. I think we've got complications perhaps around bespoke limit settings, but in terms of the easy catchments, this is a fine model.
Thanks, Tom. That was kind of a statement-y question.
Yep.
We're merging on the debate and questions, which is good for time efficiency. That's right, Elliot.
For efficiency. I
Yeah.
agree with everything Tim said, but I just want to confirm with those default limits and just in principle generally, but the take limits and the minimum flow limits, is it whichever one comes for, like whichever one was triggered first would trigger like no take?
Through you, Madam Chair, they're slightly different things. They are actually completely different things. A take limit is how much people can take, whereas a minimum flow determines when they can take. If rivers flow above the minimum flow, they can take. As river flows, observed river flows, move towards the minimum flow, they need to start reducing their take and ultimately stop taking water once the observed flow reaches minimum flow or dips below it.
Yeah. So if either the minimum flow was reached or your maximum take was reached, then
Both service cutoffs.
yeah. So whichever one comes first in those things.
Well, there could be a situation where neither happen. So you could happily take your allocation at above minimum flow.
Right.
Yeah. But you may never take your maximum take because it's raining.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, we seem to be finished on questions on this one, so we can go to phasing out over allocation. Councillor Malcolm.
Look, the only question, and it is not really a question, but I'm just really agreeing with the statement. I want to reinforce it. We need clear communication with communities, however allocated catchments are defined and identified. So, and I know you've been doing that and other work that you've been doing, but I just think that's going to be a key part to getting that through to everyone. So to take that fear away and that understanding, and that's exactly the same with before, the clear messaging around that how you're setting those limits as well. So that there will be an equal process going through. But I just thanks very much for picking those up.
Thank you.
Sorry, that's all I had. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, that's okay. Councillor Laws.
again, I need more information, not less, as to how it's going to be practically approached. So you've just mentioned that there are 19 catchments that weren't considered to be easy in terms of the first part of this, setting take limits and the environmental flows for rivers. Now, I'm assuming, and could you please confirm one way or the other, that these are the catchments for which you'll need to apply the phasing out of over-allocation. Is that correct?
Not in all cases. So some of those remaining catchments, the next step in the process for us is to look at ecological thresholds. So the rules that have been used for, or the Hayes and Richter model that have been used for the previous paper are quite conservative, and they provide you a high level of confidence that you're not having an ecological impact without having to do a lot of measurement and observation. However, some water bodies, through their inherent nature and the way that they operate, maintain a higher level of ecological resilience within them, and greater amounts of water can be taken. And we see this happen across the world, and it is the case in some of our rivers within Otago as well. So the next step is to determine what that ecological threshold might be, and then after that, you start to look at whether or not that particular catchment is still over allocated. So if we had allocation, we had a greater resilience within the river to be able to cope with abstraction, allocation, and minimum flow regimes, we can start to talk to that and to provide some evidence that supports what the appropriate number is for that river. Then we'd look at the allocation regime, and there are a couple of those catchments, well, more than a couple of those catchments that will likely fall under the bracket of have greater resilience than the Hayes and Richter model, and therefore don't require significant allocation change. There are also some that where it is likely that they do not hold that significant level of resilience, and therefore some allocation reduction may be required.
Okay, so can you provide me, I'm sure you can, a list now of the catchments that meet the criteria you've just explained?
So an example of one that was flagged up.
No, not an example, a list of them. So I don't want to know an example. I want to know which ones that our science team have considered are ripe for the phasing out of over-allocation, and also which ones are you currently studying to see if they've reached some form of ecological threshold, as you describe it, before an allocation regime can be applied. Can you provide us with those list of catchments?
We've delivered some ecological reports that the policy team are now considering for next steps, and there is more to consider than just the ecological information. So we've looked at the ecological information and compared that with the existing flow regimes and provided that evidence to the policy team. They'll then take that and determine, based on a number of factors, what those next steps might be.
So Councillor Laws, if I can just confirm, we haven't determined anything to be over allocated yet, because we need these decisions, we need this policy direction and for us to be able to apply the principles to understand the rivers, to then understand allocation.
I understand that, but you've already singled out 19.
So that's 19 where the general regional wide provisions won't apply. So today is about the region wide provisions. So what Tom's saying is there's a subset of our rivers that need more bespoke investigation. Obviously the Manahitaki is a really good example. We know that this model doesn't apply, and we've got a significantly different approach to that river. The Taieri is another one. So we're not saying that they're over allocated. We're saying that the regional model doesn't fit with them for a variety of reasons, and it needs a different approach.
So when will you come back to us with the list that I've asked for?
Michael, can I just, are you talking about the list of 19?
No, actually, I think more, on this issue, more information is better than less. So yes. Sorry, can I clarify?
Yes.
Thank you. What I'm looking for is as I understand it, a process is underway internally within the staff between science and policy. I don't want to interrupt that, but sooner or later, you'll get to a point where you are going to say, these are the catchments that are over allocated. And this is how we've come to that decision. Now, at the moment, you've given a number, 19, which you say aren't easy and don't fit an easy or qualification or criteria. I'd love to know which those 19 are. But then as you go through the process, I want to follow it through so that when you get to those catchments that you do regard as over allocated, I'm presuming that that will be coming back to us as a list too, yeah?
So through the chair, the same point we made before is before we go out for consultation 3, we'll be able to give you that list. I don't know how many is on it at this point, but it will be ahead of consultation 3.
So the answer is yes again, Michael.
That's good. That's brilliant. And then the next question is, very quickly, when would you expect us to receive that paper?
So through the chair, I'm actually just having that conversation with Fleur now because the next council meeting is the 20th of July, which is not a large council meeting, and consultation 3 is programmed for August. So we just need to have a look at the timing and we'll come back to you on that. I can't give you a definitive answer right now.
Thank you. Who else had there? Oh, Kate.
No, I
No.
can't bother going.
Right, that's fine. No other hands up on phasing out over allocation. Oh, sorry, Tim, you did.
The timeframes for these for the phasing out seem to me to be pushing things right out to the future and making this somebody else's responsibility. What is the logic behind the timeframes that we've got on the table that we're seeing there? Page 57.
To you, Madam Chair,
Yeah.
those are basically timeframes that relate to the freshwater vision, which is in the RPS. So they are determined through the RPS process, not through the land and water plan process, but we've got to work with them. What this means is basically in those FMUs and ROHE, we need to have healthy ecosystems by that time frame. It means that in order to have healthy ecosystems, we need to have dealt with allocation, so phase out over allocation where it may exist, or have minimum flows in place by that time.
So 2050 is a long time away. Why can't it be 2040?
So through the chair, so these, as Tom said, these were set in the RPS and they were structured in a really simple way around less complex to more complex catchments in terms of where we thought we'd need to go. You might recall ORC lodged a submission on the freshwater part of the RPS just to present some of the science information around the visions, and those visions are up for challenge in the RPS. They may come forward, they may go back, but that freshwater panel will make that decision. But it was quite a crude, maybe is the word for it, date chosen based on complexity of catchments.
So do we have the ability to bring those dates forward?
We don't, the freshwater panel does.
Yeah. If I may, just to clarify, the timeframes do not mean that we have to wait until then. If you read the paper, the idea is that well before that, we start actually implementing some of the improvements. So there may be interim minimum flows set at an earlier stage or steps increases in the minimum flow towards the time frame relates to the end goal, but the idea is to make some improvement in the interim as well.
Surely if your end goal was a shorter time frame, then the improvements that would be made would be quicker.
Correct, they need to be quicker. Yeah.
Yeah, graph could be anything and could go like that and then curve off, or it could go like that, or it could go in steps. You could have anything as long as you get there by that time. Councillor Malcolm, you got something?
Not on that one, no.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry,
Well, I was just going to mention page 59 and 61 has got the more of the intended structure of how we might implement organising the over allocation changing.
Yeah.
So it's not, so I think on those ones, it's probably a little bit, shows a little bit clearer, I guess.
And there it states that under stage 1, which is that initial stage, we already have stepped increases in minimum flows.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, is your hand still up?
Yeah, I've just got one question to do with this, and it relates again to central government policy, though, on this issue. I take it that we're planning that dams and hydroelectricity storage lakes, etc., will continue to be outside our purview. Yeah.
So through the chair, no. So dams are subject to the NPS freshwater, and you might recall a submission we got to the council last month or the month before around some changes to the NPS REG that actually made it clear that the NPS freshwater will have priority over the NPS REG. There are some exemptions. For example, if there are some dams, so contact dams are on an exemption list. And
yeah, sorry, those I should have been more specific.
Yeah, in terms of water quality.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they already have environmental flows in place, the hydro dams. It's important to probably note the difference between in-stream dams and out-of-stream dams. In-stream dams, we need to set limits and bring them into that allocation and environmental flow or level framework. Out-of-stream dams are slightly different. That's actually addressed in the next paper, but because they don't contribute to environmental outcomes, they're kind of exempt. So on-farm storage would not be subject to levels.
Nope.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I think we'll move on to limits for lakes then. Any questions there? Letting people get a chance to get to that paper if they haven't. Yep.
Just the first question. I mean, the thing that I've noticed in this paper and previously before was the absence of the Loganburn Dam as being included in there. And I'm not sure why that is. It says it's very similar to the Poolburn Dam, Mannaburn. It doesn't appear to be there. Perhaps I may have missed it, but it doesn't stand out, that's for sure.
Yeah. In the paper, to you, Madam Chair, in the paper, we don't list all the different lakes. We basically identified a number of categories, 5 or 6 categories, and we gave some examples. So it's purely coincidental that the Loganburn isn't in there.
That's fine, Tom. Yep. We got 700 lakes, I think we found out recently in that report in Otago. So, yep, thank you. Right, any other questions on this one? No. We'll move on to.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Gary. You go.
Thank you. Can I just take you to? I'll just go back to it. Condition or clause number 29. So if I just quickly read it out, under this approach, it is also proposed that any damming or taking activity associated with in-stream artificial lakes will be subject to a requirement to maintain a downstream flow that is equivalent to the upstream flow minus any consented allocated water, and that any environmental flows that apply to the catchment. So when I think, so that's the end of that, when I think of how that then applies to the in-stream dams that we have, which are, or especially the ones for storage, then when they have used their storage, they capture flood flow and generally have a limit at the moment to be able to pass through a certain amount. And I guess for this catchment, the Falls Dam can pass through 5 cumecs, but then above that, there's a big gap where it captures flood flow before it can spill. So to meet that condition there, are we then saying that they have to be substantially modified to be able to pass through an increased flow, of which they probably wouldn't be able to? Have I got that right? Is that?
That's correct. Now, again, you're giving the example, I believe, of Falls Dam. What we're trying to do here is come up with a management approach, and we acknowledge that there's actually quite a long pathway or a long distance between the current situation and where we want to be. And we're kind of working our way actually in terms of coming up with a framework as to how we can transition towards that. And one of the things like the infrastructure constraints for existing dams is one of the things that we're actually currently considering, like how do we best deal with that? Do we give a time frame to allow those infrastructure changes to occur, or do we basically do a phasing out? But it is implicit in the regulation that we actually have to set limits on damming or taking associated with damming.
So, sorry, thanks, Tom. But so for the likes of the Falls Dam example, where, I mean, that can be flowing at 5 cumecs through the dam or 300 cumecs when it's full and in flood. And so the benefit of the dam is that it can contain some of that flood, which has a downstream benefit to poor old Galloway and everyone else who suffers the flood, and then our flood infrastructure as it contributes to what's going down the Clutha. You really are saying that you want to change the overall integrity of the dam, what it's there and intended to do, and actually totally decommission it, really, is what that clause would say.
Yeah.
I think broadly.
Oh God, was that a yes? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're just
No,
talking
no,
amongst themselves and you're about to get an answer.
I think probably the intent of what's described in that paragraph is around ensuring that you don't see the types of river outcomes that we were talking about in the last paper, like flatlining at low levels for long periods of time, or the non-existence of any flushing flows at interim periods while you're in low flows, for instance, short summer rain and all that sort of stuff. And so it might not be that that bears out as the exact replication of flows in and out, but that there'd be practical implications so that, within a 24-hour period or a week-long period, you might achieve something that mimics that natural river flow to be able to achieve the goal of this clause. But I think you're right, there are practical implications of applying this that would need to be borne out later on.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of think of this as a framework that actually wants to guide new activities as well, new damming activities. So there are always going to be existing situations that we have to consider and come up with a kind of a bespoke arrangement. But I think it's important to think that we're trying to talk principles that guide how we're going to deal with new dams. And for those new dams, it's important that we allow some of those flushing flows to occur. So when, or upgrades as well. So when new dams or or existing dams are having significant upgrades, that a spillway is provided that allows some of those flood flows to kind of pass through the system.
Yeah, we are very lucky that our catchments with dams generally the dams are only on one stem of the catchment, and those catchments tend to naturally flush across the bulk of the catchment. So, and in the current environment, building anything new is almost virtually impossible in stream, and certainly iwi seem to be taking that view. So this is going to capture existing dams and existing dams only and almost push them towards decommissioning. Running into a lot of things across these papers that will see me voting against. Sorry, but thanks for the answers anyway.
I'm just going to point out, we do have a Philip Moore from Wynne Williams, not throwing him under the bus, but if there are any questions around the law, he's sitting in here as well.
Right, thank you. I'm just thinking from what you've said as well, though, that we're mimicking a natural flow. We're not saying, okay, we need to flood the lower parts of this river because that's the natural thing to do. We are being realistic that there will be consents that allow storage, and but yeah, so. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, do you want to answer?
No, I want to ask that question because this is exactly where I was going with. I'm sick of planning backwards. I'm really, really sick of reacting to what's been a problem in the past, and that's we've been doing too much. We've got climate change coming. We do not have the capacity in our flood works, for example, to restrain flood. In fact, we actually do this ourselves by having ponding area on the Taieri Plains, as an example, and other ponding areas. And then we go to expensive pumping out, which seems a perverse event. What I thought this was doing, and why I asked my earlier question about all of these papers, is are we planning for climate change? And in that process, if we need more energy, and for those that had to suffer my response to strategic thinking yesterday, is if we need energy, it seems perverse that we are not thinking of capturing high extensive flows that may be higher than we've planned for now, and capturing that in stem, that we can then use that water at a later stage when it gets drier than it is now to prop up those flows. The paragraph 29 I had taken as being over quite a long time, not one day, not 7 days, and being much more nuanced. You've now raised an issue. So the question is here is, are you saying you cannot hold back any water, keep it in stem, we'll encourage it on farm where it will never have an environmental benefit, it won't ever go back in the river, and that you can't use this to ensure that the river won't run dry in summer or in drier periods that we're going to have in climate change?
No.
So I think the intent of the paragraph that we're talking about is to deal with those ecologically challenging periods that like at the moment we see rivers, an example would be the Taieri or the Manuherikia, where it can rain in the headwaters and you do not see a hydrological change at all further downstream because all of that water is abstracted. And that, from an ecological perspective, is a bad outcome. The intent of this paragraph is to deal with part of that. In terms of your further point on storage, the paragraph does allow for the still taking your consented volume. And if that consented volume is significant, as is the example in Loganburn or for instance for Falls Dam, then it will have the same benefit that you're talking about in terms of flood management. But it's just it's a matter of specific examples for those specific catchments. So if you've got a high ability to take, and that ability to take ramps up with elevated flows, then you will see taking of that hydrological peak and storage of water within dams that then results in less flooding downstream.
Yeah, I think there could be nuance, and I think that it would be, it's pretty the wording because there's so many scenarios. I'm comfortable if that's how you see it, but we need to be really more nuanced in this because coming with climate change, I think we've got a really big issue that we need to be not providing for on-farm storage, which will never become an in-river benefit again. Once it's taken out on farm, whereas if it's above on the headwaters, you can do a lot more with it.
I think the paragraph does cover all that, though. The environmental flows will, just as we know more about climate,
It's
take it into account.
It's the equivalent, it's in the timeframes, which is the important one that we're not getting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
I worked in a major company that worked on words, and I told them to put everything down in numbers and show me some examples of how it actually worked. And 2 years later, when they pushed the button go, everything was a disaster, and they realised they should have done those examples. So that's, to me, and that's going on from Councillor Kelleher, that what is that statement going to actually do based on the scientific knowledge we have to existing dams? And that's the sort of, I'm happy, I'm not going to stop the process, but it would be very, very good to understand what that is actually going to do to existing process and how that fits with things going forward.
We'll be very specific on what the naturalised flow is and also what the environmental flow ends up being, though, won't it? So, yeah, as a principle, though, I think it makes sense that a river, well, that's to me, it's the principle of should a river be able to go up and down, sort of mimicking what it would naturally do. I think that's where we're going to get to. It's how a panel would look at it, surely, because of the matters that Tom's raised, which are that rivers need that type of variation to be healthy.
So if I apply that to the Falls Dam and take the Falls Dam out of the equation to naturalise everything, so I get rid of the Falls Dam, the Manuherikia will actually go dry. So, and that's proven. So I'm just wondering where the...
I think it's important to realise this is region-wide.
Yeah.
So these are the region-wide provisions.
I appreciate that, but when we write something like this, it takes, there surely has been some numbers or some trialing to say, well, this is, paint the picture of actually what it does. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with the wording, and I understand what you're trying to achieve, but show us an example of what that actually does. And then you might say, well, actually, we need to tweak that wording one way or the other.
And that's so what we've heard today is that the policy direction, which has been through multiple workshops, which we're looking to get noted today, enables that work to then be undertaken, which provides some better examples. That because we know when we go out to the community that they will want to understand what does this mean for me, and that's a very, very fair expectation. And so we've heard that. We've heard a couple of questions from Michael. Gary's line of questioning slightly different, but is suggesting the same thing around what does this actually mean. So I think that we had that message clearly. It's just getting the direction now to enable that sort of investment in time from staff to then put this into practical situations to bring back.
That's the same for a number of these, isn't it? You want us to give some guidance so then you can figure out how it would work for catchments and discuss that with them. So Gary, you've got your hand up again. Would you like to have another question?
Yeah, well, it is because I just need to follow my question, I suppose, to Tom, because he made a statement that when it rains in the headwaters, it is all taken for irrigation or part of the allocated takes. But that isn't actually the case because when it rains in the Manuherikia catchment, it rains in Dunstan Creek and it rains in the headwaters of the Manuherikia, which are side by side, and Dunstan Creek then does almost every time then flush the river, and the schemes are working to their consent, so they aren't then taking all of that water. But I think, and that does apply across those other really key catchments with dams on them. So I'm just really worried from a general perspective, this policy is really going to end up affecting those dams, and those dams are so old, you can't just modify them to allow greater flows to bypass. So I think a lot more work needs to be done on this before council could consider it as something that then would happen, because what will happen is when it's put to the community, the message will be told to the community that council has approved this.
Okay. We need to move on. We have some of us have discussed this at length already, and I think factors like that would be taken into account, I think, including those like we talked about, transitions over time and timescales of them, and consent, as we talked about as well, and the paragraph outlines. So yeah, exactly. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Kelleher. There's some factors to consider, and they would be considered at each catchment level. Thank you. However, yeah, variation is important, I believe. So we'll move on from this one. We're just going to need to vote on it, I think, because there'll be different views on different things at different times, and that's all right. Elliot, did you have something, though? Yeah, we've got some other ones though, in case, because it probably is quite useful for everyone to understand where we're coming from too as we move forward. We have got setting target and interim target attribute states. Is there anything anyone particularly has on those? No. Indicative target, indicative target attribute states and current states and trends. Yep, Kevin.
Sorry, no, I was going down to the contaminant discharges.
Righty-o.
So if we put it into regulation, I'll bring up the question, when we're if we're putting it into regulation, our GMPs and our GMP pluses into regulation, what science have we got to show that those GMPs will actually do what we are trying to achieve with them? Because at the end of the day, if we apply it, it doesn't have the result at the other end.
We're just coming to the end of an 18-month long piece of work to do just that. And the report is in peer review with an external peer reviewer at the moment.
Thanks, Tom. Much appreciated.
Looks like we're opening it up for any questions on anything then. Did you have other ones?
Yeah,
go for it.
And onto plantation forestry, and it is probably one of the things, and if I go back to specifically to the Livingston fire, one of the biggest issues we had up in that Livingston fire was the inability of people to get access to fight that fire. And while we've got and everything we've got there, there's actually nothing about access. There is saying managed fire risk and there's standards managed in plantation forestry, but really for as a safety aspect is access, and also for pest control is access. So I just wonder if there's a...
Yeah, so through the chair, what I understand is the changes to the NESPF that were announced last week includes the requirement for things like fire breaks, which hopefully also serve as access. But access on its own isn't, unless it's to a lake or a river, isn't a regional council function.
No, but
I think we can through the fire breaks.
Yeah, that's one thing we'd push for. So that's good. Thank you. I just haven't had a chance to read all of them. That's me finished.
Last chance for any other questions or comments.
The whole day.
Yeah.
I've just got a question. It's just around the I've lost it, but setting your attribute states and targets and how nuanced it's going to be, because we've got our tables there now, which each rohi seems to have the same targets for every site. So is that what we're suggesting that will be going forward, or my understanding it'll be more set more on a precise level or catchment level?
That's the starting point, but we're considering setting it at a lower level. That's actually something that we're working through today, before and after the meeting. Is can we set them? Do we have enough information? Because we don't have enough information, everywhere to kind of set them bespoke, or do we pick a few? Yeah, but it's definitely up for consideration. Right, stuff. Yeah,
it's just like in each area, there's different grades of waterways. You could say so. You naturally expect to have different levels of contaminants within different grade of a waterway.
So I think the answer is we'll make it as nuanced as we're able to, based on the science and monitoring data that we have.
So they're not the ultimate numbers at the end of the day.
No, they're absolutely not. They need to be adjusted. For example, we cannot allow for degradation, and what we see is that at some monitoring sites the situation is better than the target state, so at that site we have to bring it up.
Okay, Andrew. Yeah, we've got, I think we very early on had a mover in the second. Yep. So we've got that, and Lloyd, you were the last one. You're moving them all together, I think.
I was just moved them all together as per the paper. Notes and moved.
So we'll put that then. You've seen what those motions are. They're the same ones you've got before you.
Can I just speak
to?
Oh, sure, sorry, yep.
I think what this discussion has highlighted is the very complex nature of what we're dealing with as a regulatory authority as we embrace government legislation, the challenges that we've got within our community, whether it's environmental, economic, social, cultural. To be fair, the cultural aspect is taken care of at central government, essentially, using the Te Mana Rota Wai framework. But I think anyone around this table who thinks these decisions are easy needs to go away and rethink, and I think appreciate the amount of effort that the staff are putting in to help us along this journey. But I want to reinforce, just reflecting on the conversation around the tables, that we not only need our staff doing the job, whether it's at a policy aspect, but from a science perspective, but we also need the knowledge of our community to be able to get to the end goal. And I appreciate these are the region-wide provisions, and this is probably a slightly less complex step than we're going to have at the next stage. But I just really want to reinforce, every time we have one of these conversations, I'm always learning something. So I don't think we'll ever be fully, you can never have enough information through these processes. And I'm just reinforcing that these are difficult processes, but this is a step towards getting closer to those complex catchments to resolve those matters, which probably are more at the forefront of our minds than the region-wide provisions. And that's probably fair enough as well. But we need everybody on board to be able to get to those appropriate, whether it's dealing with the over-allocation, dealing with the minimum flow, dealing with plantation forestry, or whatever it might be. So yeah, hang in there. We will get there. Cheers.
Thanks. Well said. We got some other hands up there, just conscious as well. We're over time now for a break and then back into it as well soon. So Councillor Laws, though.
I just want to emphasise the basic philosophical thrust of the questions that I asked during that period. And I think we need to keep uppermost in our minds that it's great to have principles and it's great to have values and it's great to have directions. But at the end of the day, we need, and I mean as a governance team, to be able to answer the simple question of how does this policy apply in detail? When it hits the ground, we need to have the answer for that. And we need to be very aware when we pass a policy, how it's going to apply in detail. So if staff can take anything out of this discussion today, I hope it is that that is going to be uppermost in our minds. I'm not critical or criticising the process that we've undertaken at all, but I am saying that the next step is in many ways the most important. Okay, now what does this mean in real terms for real people in real situations? And we need to be aware of that around the table as well before we take the next step too. Thank you.
Gary.
Yes, thank you. I won't take too long. I would echo those previous statements, and also too that there just isn't enough information of the true implications of what has been presented to us to then be able to say with confidence we understand what it will mean across Otago, what it will improve and what it won't improve. So when we do put it to the vote, I'd like to call for a division, please. Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else?
Oh, yeah, so yeah, come back to myself.
Yep.
Yes, I'm not going to take too long either. I just want to just mention that 3 years ago, the council made a decision to invest in science so that we can make plans to have real science in-house to work for our environment, and that investment is starting to show through, and we're getting, there's a lot of papers in tomorrow as well, we're getting some really good baseline data, and we're getting some good information that is actually backed by peer-reviewed proven science. The papers we've got here today is the start of the process. It is an important meeting. It's a watershed meeting where the rubber is hitting the road. But what we're doing is basically giving our policy team some direction as to where to to invest in their time and efforts so that they can bring to us real live examples of how the papers or how the direction of travel is going to affect our communities. And but also how that we can apply Te Manawa Te Wai as to what we're doing and the hierarchy of Te Manawa Te Wai, so that we're actually recognizing our waterways and our lakes and our natural environments for what they are, being special tonga, and then also but then after that, how's the best way that we can use what the environment can give us so that we can benefit our community as a whole. So I'm more than happy to have the motion support. Thank you.
Yeah, you were the mover, eh?
I was, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah,
That's
it
just
was
a point of clarity, is it? I just,
okay,
yeah,
yeah.
point of clarity. Am I correct in saying that before we go to community consultation, that we will have the ability to have live examples of how these policies that we've just talked about will affect those water bodies?
Yes, we'll socialise what each FMU looks like before we go out.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to give the councillors around the table some confidence and comfort as well. When we come up with these principles that guide decision making, we're actually kind of literally taking a life example and working through it and how it would apply. And so dealing with those existing situations where we don't have like a blank sheet to work from and how we, it's very much on the front of our mind. And we're trying our way to work our way through developing a framework that works for them as well.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
it, yeah.
Thanks, Lloyd. Okay, we're going to put this in. We've already had a division called.
Are you ready for me?
Yeah, just
Yes.
start, Kylie. Thank you.
Councillor Forbes. Councillor Callagher.
Against.
Councillor Laws.
No.
Councillor Malcolm.
Yes.
Councillor McCall.
For.
Councillor Noon.
Aye.
Councillor Methven.
Yes.
Councillor Scott is not here. Councillor Somerville.
Yes.
Councillor Weir.
Yes.
Councillor Wilson. Yes. And Councillor Robertson.
Yes.
So we have 2 against and all the rest for.
Yep. Against, and I think it's 9, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. So we'll declare the motions 1. Right. Okay. It is now time for an adjournment. So we'll get somebody to move that. Tim seconded. Alexa, we'll have a break for. Oh, sorry. All in favour? Against? Carried. We'll have a break for lunch. What's the rough time got there? It's going to need to be quite quick, isn't it? 1:45. Oh, there you go.